Here, 3.10 formatted output. This starts on page 161. I will be honest with you guys, I struggle with being able to explain the parts of this with a sensible version of why it is that formatting output in Java is so freaking weird. There's a long historical reason with why formatting output in Java looks so weird. It's because it derives from another even weirder, ancienter. Is it more ancient? I think it's probably more ancient. More ancient kind of a language than even Java is by now, which is pushing past 30 years. But it's the most unusual thing you'll see, and I think it's a shame that I have to put this after the conditional operator because it's like plucking the two strangest things that Java does out of the blue and putting them next to each other in a chapter, which is, I'm not sure this is true, but I think it is. It's against the Geneva Convention of 1949. So what I'll do is I will go through it with as many different examples here in the text as I can. And I have an example built for you in the code sample portion for later on that I hope makes it better. It's one of those things where, like I have this condition now in, trying to help my 5-year-old grow to speak English when he's like, look how many gooses. And I have to say, it's geese, buddy. There's 15 geese. And he's like, so is it one geese? And I say, no, it's English. It's a weird thing. So if there's just one goose, there's a goose. But if there's two gooses, there's two geese. This is the exact same thing. Like, I don't like telling you this all the time. And I know I said this exact same thing back in chapter 2. But this is one of those things where if you just, like the scanner with the keyboard, if you just memorize the way it goes and don't fight to look for, a modern sensibility of why in the hell does it look this way, honestly, I think that that's the best way to go. So I know that was a huge setup for something, and now you're like, well, okay, my toes are curled, my backside is puckered, I know this is going to be difficult. It's really not that difficult. It's just a little bit weird. So what I'll tell you is we have the opportunity here with printf to print things in a format. And so instead of just print line, there are going to be times where we want to do a printf. The formatting, the dance that we need to memorize to get the formatting right is just a little bit scroopy, but it goes together pretty quickly. And the general, I hope this is page 162, the general idea here is that when you have a system.out.println, or printf rather, you would have your opening and closing ellipses. Those are your parens, just like this. We would have a format with a comma and then our argument list. So they all of the printf formatting techniques that we're going to see here are exactly this. System.out.printf, and then a string of stuff, a comma, and then stuff you want to include in there. So what really does this mean? It's going to look like this. And this is still page 162 for you guys. We have double sales, and that's 12345.67. And here inside of our printf, we have our, first and foremost, inside of that parens, we've got the quotation marks, right? So we're going to say this is going to our output stream. This is going to be in our output window. Our sales are %f. This indicates that we've got a format for floating point numbers. So we're looking here at decimals for the day, and then our escape character here is \n, and that means a new line. So everything that's happening inside of here, we want to be regurgitated into our output window. After the comma, we have comma sales. What we're saying here is that sales is what we want displayed here for the floating point format that I specified in this out statement. So the result of these two lines being run is right here. Our sales are 12345.670000 for the day. That's imperfect, right? That's not real fantastic looking, because the last time I checked, most people don't understand money as having, how many decimal places is that? That is, a grand total of 6 numbers after the decimal place. This is not what we want to see. So what we would want is something a little bit more specific than that. Now, before we get to the specific part, it bears mentioning here on page 162 still that we can have as many of these %f, %fs as we need. And as long as we have a comma-separated list of, there we go, a comma-separated list of variables here, those are going to slot in right here. So as you can see in our previous example, sales slots in with this %f we see here. Temp 1 is going to go to our first %f, and temp 2 is going to be here in our second %f. So that looks like what you see happening right down here. Is that weird? Yeah, a little bit. And it's going to get weirder. If we continue, you'll notice that we really don't want 6 points of specificity after our decimal place, do we? I mean, that's a little bit crazy. We want to do a little bit better than that. In that case, we have to work with, how many points of precision we want. Now, I'm going to skip over this, and I'm going to come back to this later, but we're going to talk really quickly here about precision and our format specifier, and that is way down here on 165. So here, I've got a temperature of 78.42819. At least I hope that's what that says. And what I don't want is this whole mish after the decimal point to be shown. What I want is just 2 points of specificity. So here, I've got my printf statement. The temperature is %f. We've seen that before, but in between we have 0.2. What we're saying is %f, show me this as floating point, and 0.2 is with 2 decimals of specificity, and we can see that right here. Now, before I continue, let me draw your attention to something. Notice what my double temp really is, 78.428. And notice what I see in my output here for 78.43. It has rounded for me successfully there. So do be aware that this is going to round to those decimal places. For many things, that's going to be okay. For many things, that is not going to be okay. And you have to know as a developer, do I need a very, very high rate of accuracy and specificity here? Or do I not need a high rate of accuracy here? So if we wanted, for example, and continuing just a little further, the temperature is, so again, %f, that is my floating point format. So that means I want decimal places. And the 0.1 here tells me just 78.4 degrees. Now, if we wanted, instead of floating point, if we wanted it to be an integer value, right? We want it represented without any numbers after the decimal point. It's actually D, and we can see that back a little ways here. Let me see. This is page 164. My integer hours. I don't know why it's not scaling properly for this, guys. Integer hours equals 40, and here inside of my printf, so again, that's my print format, I have I worked %d hours this week, new line character, comma, hours. What we're saying is hours is going to be represented back here with the %D, and the D, you're going to hate this as much as I do, is decimal integer. I have nothing but middle fingers for the jackwagon computer scientists that took their bullshit, like, high caliber engineering degrees and forced decimal integer upon us as a D. Because when we think about decimals, we think about decimals. And they were like, no, you plebeians, that's a floating point number. And then I would have taken their inhaler and pushed them in their locker or done whatever it is that they were looking for me to do in cruel 1950s nerd culture or whatever the hell this is about. It's a little far for me. But if you want to show something as an integer, just remember it's %D. If you want to show something as a decimal point, it's a floating point number. It's a %F. Read through the rest of these because I know this just gets to be a lot. And then we'll see a formatted output example later on where we'll go through and we'll use it to make a nice, essentially a very, very small like Excel spreadsheet out of numbers so that you can see how to apply this. For the most part, you'll see something exactly like this. systemout.printf, I worked, and then either %D or %F, and then something else, and then after the comma, this argument belongs to that %D or that %F. So really that's as complicated as we're going to get with the formatted printing, and you are going to see another example of it, and it is genuinely useful. It is also a little genuinely strange, but that's okay.